Hey girl, welcome to the Feminine Founder Podcast, where we are all about learning and growing professionally so that we can build a life that we are proud of and really love. My name is Caroline, and I'm a LinkedIn expert obsessed with teaching female entrepreneurs how to start, grow, and scale their personal brand and business on LinkedIn. This podcast is all about sharing our stories and learning from each other on how to navigate our professional journey so that we can live our best lives. So if you are just starting out on your entrepreneurial journey, or you're growing and scaling an epic company, you are in the right place, friends. Today, I have Lynn Robinson with me. Lynn is a best-selling author and one of the nation's leading speakers on the hot topic of developing and trusting your intuition. She teaches how to tap into the power of your inner GPS. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you for having me.
So you're a best-selling author. You've written 7 books total. And
Right.
you're a keynote speaker and a intuitive advisor.
Yes, all of the above.
So tell me, how did you get to where you are now?
Oh my goodness. Well, I had the weirdest manifestation story. I bet you on this podcast have never heard of anybody whose business got launched at a funeral. I bet I'm the first.
That's a first.
It is. I know. So I was the operations manager of a software company in Boston and decided that wasn't what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was fascinated by intuition and spirituality and how intuition can help us make good life decisions, business or otherwise. And I started taking classes on intuition, and I decided that's what I want to do. I want to help people trust their intuition. I want to help guide people using my intuition. And so I did what a lot of us are now familiar with, kind of law of attraction. And I just said, okay, I've got a successful full-time intuitive advisor business. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm writing books. I'm traveling the world. And what happened a few months later was unfortunately, a friend of mine died. And I went to his funeral, and it honestly was an intuition moment because I felt, I don't know, I guess the word is guided to sit next to a woman that I didn't know. And the short version of the story was that she ended up being a Boston Globe newspaper reporter. And I did a session with her, my intuitive advising session. And she said, oh my gosh, this is really wonderful. And at the end, I said, we really didn't talk about what you did for a living. Well, it turned out that she was the writer for the Boston Globe newspaper. She wrote an article about me, and I got over 500 clients in the next few months. So yeah, I know. So that was my funeral, started my business story. But yeah, I'm a real big believer in trusting one's intuition, obviously, but also I find that when we get clear what we want, our intention, that intuition starts to kick in. It's kind of like our inner GPS. And so I think it guided me to sit next to that woman at the funeral. It wasn't like she had a big sign on her that said, sit here because I'm going to write an article about you.
I love that story. And thank you so much for sharing. And I'm actually fascinated with law of attraction and intuition as well, because even, starting this podcast and starting the businesses that I have, I mean, I had to buckle down and pay attention to my intuition, or else it never would have happened.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that intuition is often the missing piece in the law of attraction and manifestation, that because we're all being guided in one way. We don't all get it in the same way. It might be an aha moment, an inner voice. It might be a dream, synchronicities and coincidences that begin to unfold. But the intuition piece is that you have to follow that intuition. I had to follow that intuition to sit next to that woman at the funeral. And so many other incidences in my life having to trust that. I mean, the way I put it is a little bit woo-woo, but I feel like the universe is on our side. It wants us to have what is in our heart, whether it's a business of some sort or a relationship. And that when we trust that intuition, it's that part of us that's really guiding us towards our destination, like our inner GPS.
So I want to unpack that further. How would you define intuition, and how do you know when it's showing up?
Yeah. It is a little bit of practice, which is the boring answer, because it's kind of like learning a language, and there's no one way that's the right way. And so you kind of have to figure out how it does speak to you. And so it is maybe just trusting it on some small things. It's not necessarily trusting it on the big things like, should I quit my job? Should I marry or divorce? Something big like that. But try it on some small things. What's my right next step? What could I do today to grow my business? And I always just take a few moments every day. I mean, it's not like contemplating my navel for half an hour at a time, but it's more just sitting quietly and going, what could I do to grow my business today? And again, you might get that aha moment like, oh, that's a good idea. Or you might get a voice. You might find that throughout the day that you run into a podcast or a person or have a conversation with somebody that gives you an answer. So I think it's always guiding you. Um, the answer to what is it, my favorite definition is from a 15-year-old girl who said intuition is when you know something, but like, where did it come from? And it's true. I honestly don't know where it comes from, but I think that it's all hardwired into each one of us, and we just have to learn how it communicates.
So what happens when we don't trust our intuition?
Well, I've certainly had plenty of those times, and I'm sure all of the listeners have, and you have. I find that things don't work out as well. They don't work out as smoothly. One of the ways that intuition communicates is if something feels consistently boring, draining, you're not excited about it, that's your intuition saying either move away from that or don't go there in the first place. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that we're hardwired with a guidance system that says, if something feels uplifting, it makes you feel at peace, it makes you feel expansive, you're excited about it. That's your intuition saying go in that direction. But, have I personally done a lot of things where I didn't trust that intuition? Yes, I should do this. This is what I should do for my business because that's what everybody else is telling me to do. And usually those things just didn't work out. I bet you have a few stories like that as well.
I was going to ask you that because when I first started my product-based business, my wine product, Chilled Vino, that I invented, at the time I had a corporate job. I was making a 6-figure salary and I couldn't afford to spend the time marketing it. I outsourced it, and my intuition told me to do my own marketing. And I just told myself I didn't have the time to do my own marketing. And so I spent and wasted a ton of time and money on outsourcing it. So I'd love to hear a story that you may have too in that department.
Yeah, we were talking before we actually started the podcast about the expensive PR person I hired and the same kind of thing. And, I've taken so many marketing classes and, I've got an atypical business. You've got an atypical business. I bet a lot of people who are listening fall under that category. And a lot of the marketing experts out there don't fit what we do. And so my favorite marketing technique is to say, and I think of it as sort of my intuitive business plan. I say, okay, what's the outcome I want? What does success look like? So, and again, if you think about that inner GPS model, it kind of makes sense. It's like on a GPS on your phone or your car, you're saying, here's where I want to go. And then I spend a few minutes every day. I just kind of visualize it, imagine it as if it's already happened. And then the action part is, what could I do today to grow this business? And I'm a little bit of an overachiever, so I always say, what 5 things can I do? and I don't have to be something big. It's not like write a book or start a podcast or something. It could be reaching out to Caroline. That was one of my intuitions. It could be writing your blog. It could be taking a walk. It could be having coffee with a friend. So because I find that each time I trust those intuitions, something unfolds. A new person shows up or a new idea or a new opportunity. So I tell people to experiment with it and just try it in low risk situations at first. Yeah.
We'll be right back.
It's that time of year again. Summertime is in full swing. I don't know if you're like me, but your girl hates drinking a warm beverage. That's why I created Chilled Vino. Chilled Vino is my patented drinkware product, designed with innovative cooling technology to keep your wine or cocktail cold. With a long stem and elegant feel, you can enjoy your wine or cocktails outdoors. Chilled Vino is shatterproof and resembles a wine glass made of BPA-free plastic. You place in the freezer 4 hours prior to using and remove, and voila, it'll keep your wine cold for hours. You can find it at www.chilledvino.com or on Amazon. So what if your intuition is showing up and telling you to do something that's uncomfortable?
It almost always is. And that's one of the reasons that people have a hard time trusting their intuition, because it does lead them out of their comfort zone. And that's probably the biggest thing that I can emphasize, because I just think your life purpose isn't hidden behind the door that says this is easy or this or have no fear or anything. I mean, I'm sure you had the same experience that I did, that when starting my business, I was terrified. I mean, I had a well-paying job as that operations manager of that software company. And, so my logical brain and my parents, everybody else are going, why are you leaving that job? You've got good benefits and good pay and you're going to get promoted. And but I was terrified. I mean, I thought, oh my gosh, what if all those people are right and I'm wrong? And, but I knew I had to take the risks. One of my favorite books, I can't think of the author off the top of my head, but it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And so that's my motto in life. And, I'm really grateful for that because it certainly brought me a lot of interesting experiences. Because I think if we play it safe and we stay on the sidelines, somebody else is going to get that Childvino idea and I'll act on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me too, just honestly, some of those things, those safe places of staying in the corporate job or the benefits of the 401k, and the people saying, oh, you shouldn't leave those, it looks shiny from the outside. Right. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to prove them wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And in the beginning, what was like, okay, how's your little podcast going? They're now like, whoa, what's going on now?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Exactly. I know. Isn't it amazing? Because this is a little bit of a generalization, of course, but I just find I divide the world into two types of people. One, people who are not going to take a risk and that they want to stay as safe as possible and, have things pretty clear cut. I mean, sometimes those things don't work out, even if that's our intention, for sure. But I think the other part of the world is, I'm seeing something that feels like it's my passion, feels like it's my purpose. It's making me feel alive. And, it's certainly not without its risks, and you're going to have a lot of naysayers around you, but you also need to actively seek out the people who are going to say, yes, atta girl, you're doing great. But I know sometimes our little inner voice is our worst enemy. And, that's the other thing I find with people who, often come to me for an intuitive session is that their inner talk, their self-talk is really negative. I don't have the confidence, or other people are good at this and I'm not, or I don't have the money or the education, or fill in the blank. And I think, we all feel that way. I mean, you admitted to being scared when you started your business. I did too. I used to cry in my office before my clients, like, what are I figure out? I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think it's just, you have to kind of take that leap and trust that you're going to be okay. Again, it may just be some small steps at first, but go in the direction of your dream and what excites you. That's a great way to live life.
I feel like and you can correct me if you're wrong because you're the intuition expert, but I feel like your intuition honestly knows you better than you know yourself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we hire expensive outside experts to, try to launch our business or market us or do something. And yet there is, I like to think of it as, again, that inner CEO or the inner GPS, that there's a kind of a spirit that that's part of our intuition that wants us to be successful, that knows our skills and talents, that can find an ideal situation for us to flourish in. So absolutely. I know, and we both talked before we started the show about all those expensive experts that we both hired, and yet when we trusted ourselves, that's when the business got launched. Yeah.
So pivoting a little bit here, I feel like in the past it was not okay to talk about following your intuition or your gut when we're talking about corporate.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Corporate decision making, corporate executives, even for entrepreneurs. I mean, because it's kind of vulnerable, in my opinion, to say, well, it was my gut opinion. So why has that become more acceptable now to talk about?
My theory is that because the world has changed so much that we can no longer rely on, well, this has always worked for us, and this is what we've always done in the past. We can't do that anymore. And so we're having to be pioneers, and pioneers are requiring intuition. Pioneers are requiring some creative thoughts, some different ways of thinking about things. So I think we're absolutely needing intuition now. And there's been a lot of studies that say that people who use their intuition are often the most successful ones. And, it's not like, our right brain intuition is, just completely trust that. I mean, obviously we have two sides of the brain for a reason. There's sometimes some decisions where we need to be logical and rational and look at the budget and the numbers and is this feasible? But there's another side that's going, yes, go for it. Yes, that makes me feel excited. That makes me feel at peace. I know I've got the skills and talents. I want to offer this to the world. So there's both sides. But I think our world is requiring new leadership now. It's requiring those of us to really take those leaps and to do things different and to bring about a more compassionate and interesting world that really solves a lot of these problems, very difficult problems that we have in the world. We can't think in the old ways anymore.
I love that answer because you're right. And I think even talking about it as a leader humanizes them as a leader.
Right. Yeah. And I do find, it's funny, a decade or two ago, nobody knew what a coach was. And, it's like that was kind of new to hire a coach. And I think that the person in the future that people are going to be hiring are people who really use their intuition, whether they do what I do, intuitive advisor, or it's some other person who's coming and helping people learn to trust their intuition. Because I think that is just a skill we're going to need in the next decade or two for sure. And I think it's just, it's absolutely a skill that's learnable. I mean, I do think some of us maybe are born with it a little more than others, perhaps like being born into a musical family or an athletic family. I think some of us, the intuition comes a little bit easier. I found out actually after I had started this business that my maternal grandfather, who had been a police detective in London, had in his retirement started doing spiritual healing. And so I think there was some energy there in my family that must have been made it me more open to it. But that was funny. I didn't know that when I had started my business, kind of a secret in the family, if you will.
I love that he started that. I mean, because that's such a 180 from working in law enforcement,
Yeah, although I bet he had to use his intuition a lot in doing that, yes, to be successful at it. But definitely, yeah, the police detective to spiritual healing, yeah, that was a bit of a career leap. I bet he felt nervous about that too.
That's just a great testament and story, though, that you can make pivots in your career, especially if you trust your intuition.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we're called to do that more than ever. I mean, probably our parents and grandparents' generation, we mostly had one job that we stayed in for our whole lives. And now that's just ridiculous. Most of us wouldn't even want that if we could have it. But, or maybe those people who don't like risk, maybe they would like that. But yeah, I mean, between being downsized, laid off, a company moving or merging or whatever, we're often faced with those pivots in life. And I think that's really where the intuition can help. So, I mean, again, my favorite technique is just to write down, what does it look like? What's that? You don't even have to know what's the specific, like want to work for XYZ company or have this job title, but what do I want in that next job? Or what do I want in that next piece of work or, that career that I want? And just, to really write it down. I think there's something very powerful about that. And that's where the intuition can begin to guide you to that right circumstance and those right people.
So I'd love to hear more about your 3-step intuitive technique that will create a fun and successful life.
Yeah. So the first part is the one I just said, the kind of writing it down. And people often get kind of messed up in that first step because they kind of go, how is it going to happen? Well, I'm going to win the lottery and then I can develop my business. And, in a way, I think that woman who I sat next to at the Boston Globe, was the Boston Globe newspaper reporter, she was my lottery ticket. I mean, now I've been in my business for over 30 years now. And she kind of was my lottery ticket. I mean, not literally, but so I think that writing it down, being clear what you want. I spend a few minutes for step 2. I spend a few minutes every day visualizing it. So my specific process, what I believe is that when we kind of think about what we want as if it's already happened. My business is flourishing. It's successful. I'm happy. I have great staff. I'm making this much money or more every year. And just really being in that feeling, that belief that what you have is what you want is what you have. It sounds ooey wooey. I mean, a lot of it's law of attraction. But I think that it's very powerful to do that because you start believing that it is possible. You start feeling what it's like to have it. And then the third step is that, take what action can I take? I think asking our intuition questions, empowering questions is important. A lot of us ask disempowering ones. Why am I not making enough money? Why is Caroline more successful than I am? We ask ourselves kind of disempowering ones. So empowering ones, and that's maybe the third step, is to say, what could I do today to grow the business? What's my right next step? What can I do to create more money? Or simply making a statement, I want information about how to grow my business. I keep an old fashioned pad of paper and a pen. You can certainly do it on a keyboard. But I find it, and again, I know it sounds woo woo, but I just start writing almost like it's automatic writing, like brainstorming. Um, and yet I find when I look back at those notes from years ago, I go, wow, that really worked out. That was actually pretty wise advice. So you're going to feel like you're making it up. But I actually think, think of it as your inner CEO giving you a message. I think that's the best way to, maybe non-woo-woo way to think about it.
I'm here for all the woo-woo because even though
good.
it sounds
I
fluffy
thought
and
you were a
whatever,
fellow woo-woo.
on the outside, it works. And I talk about this all the time, more so on Instagram than I do LinkedIn, but you have to take the action. You have to write it down. You have to feel it. But then you have to take action. And a lot of times I talk to people and they say, well, I'm not good at it, or I haven't done this before, or whatever.
Exactly.
And I say this all the time is you have to get good at sucking at first. Like,
yes,
just
good
like
point.
if you're going to go to the gym, you're not going to get a six pack in 2 weeks. You got to work on it.
Yeah, you can't be a concert pianist the first day out. Yeah. Yeah, and it does take a lot of humility, I think, to be okay with sucking at it. I mean, that I'll tell you, those first few months of my doing that business, I kept thinking, when are they going to find out I don't know what I'm doing? And I felt so inadequate. And yet here I am over 30 years later, still doing it and still having clients and having written 7 books. So, and, I do think that you have to be persistent, and it's like kind of grow your courage muscles. I think what everybody keeps wanting is a courage pill or a magic wand that gives you courage, because it feels scary. I mean, I look back on all the things that have actually worked well in my life and have made me more successful. And I think most of those were really scary to begin with. The first time I ever gave a speech, to 2,000 people with a translator in Japan. Oh my gosh, I was so terrified. I almost pushed my husband in front of the stage when I was getting introduced, going, "You go be Lynn Robinson." It was so scary.
Oh my God.
And then there was an earthquake at the end of that speech, Caroline. So I had reason to worry, but I didn't know that in the beginning.
That's hilarious, and I can relate.
Oh gosh, definitely takes a lot of courage to be a business owner too, because as I said, you got a lot of naysayers around you.
It's easier to be a naysayer than a supporter, and then it's funny because the naysayers they turn back to be a supporter, but they're on the late train, and it's like, we remember those days.
Where were you when I needed the support? Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about worry. What are some tips that you share in your book or in your speeches because everyone worries, right? Everyone has things going on, life, even if you're in the peak or pinnacle part of your life, there's still probably something that's going on.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
It's part of it is really paying attention to what you say to yourself. Because I guess I'd call him a spiritual teacher back when I was in my 20s. And whenever I or anybody else had one of those negative things like, oh, you can't make money in this economy, or all the good guys are taken, or I'd never be successful, he would just stand there, and it was so visual and specific. He'd stand there with his hands on his hips and go, if you say so, it's true. Now, he was implying that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and to a certain extent, I mean, maybe a generalization, but I do think that those are true. So I really had to learn how to switch gears on, if I was constantly worrying about something, to ask myself, what do I want instead? And to really shift my focus. And it wasn't easy. I mean, multiple times a day, I would catch myself worrying and being anxious. And, I'm a big believer in affirmations, and you can't really give one to somebody else because you kind of have to find one that really works for you. But the one that I like that works for me is, one is, I'll figure it out. Everything is figure outable. And the other one is kind of just an affirmation, may all of this unfold with ease and grace. Because I think we, in our own mind, we start creating worry, fear. What if this doesn't work? This is what it's going to look like if it doesn't work. I'm going to be a bag lady on the street. It's interesting that there's no bag boys. You can say bag ladies, but not bag boys. Doesn't make sense. But anyway, I digress. So I just think really switching the gears and going, what do I want instead? And it takes practice. I mean, I still catch myself worrying.
I love that you brought up talking to yourself because
We all do it.
we all do it. And it's, how are we talking to ourselves? Are we being kind
Mm-hmm.
to ourselves, or are we
Yeah,
being ugly to ourselves?
right. Yeah. What's another way of looking at this? Is a good question to ask. What would be a kinder response to myself? What would a person I admire say to me about this worry? Those are all things that are great to kind of switch the channel on worry.
So what is lighting you up with some of the clients that you're working with right now?
I love working with people in business, just who, especially people who are entrepreneurs, who have a big vision, a big idea. And so what I do when I'm doing my intuitive advising is just kind of really tuning in, using my own intuition, helping them use theirs, maybe seeing what's standing in the way. Because a lot of times it's like that inner talk that we have that we just go on automatic. And so, just really helping people achieve their dream. I tend to be one of those yay sayers rather than the naysayers. So I think all of us need that kind of encouragement. But I really do try to trust my intuition. And people call me, when they've got a person that they're about to hire, or they're having a problem employee or a problem partner, or they've got a vision of something they want to do and they kind of need it to be fleshed out. So I love, those are my favorite people. People who have a big vision. Absolutely. Yeah.
So as we wrap up, how can our listeners find you?
My website is lynnrobinson.com. It's Lynn, no E. So that's the best way and most easy way. I'm certainly on lots of social media. And my latest book is called Put Your Intuition to Work. So, I'm really passionate about teaching people how to do it. So, because, you read a lot of these business books that it's important to trust your intuition, but nobody tells you how to do it. So that's one of the things I'm passionate. That lights me up, Caroline.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you. Great to talk to you.